You made a financial decision today that you were not aware of making. You will make several more before this day is finished. Not large decisions, not the kind you sit down and think through carefully. Small ones, automatic ones, the kind that feel so ordinary, so harmless, that you never stop to examine them. And yet these are the decisions that are building your financial future right now, one repeated action at a time, whether you are directing them or not. I want you to consider a disturbing possibility. What if the reason you are not where you want to be financially has nothing to do with your income, your intelligence, or your circumstances? What if the real cause is a set of habits so deeply embedded in your daily routine that you have never once questioned them? Through my years of studying achievement and failure, I came to understand that the difference between people who build lasting wealth and people who struggle with money year after year is rarely a difference of ability. It is a difference of habit. And the most dangerous habits are the ones you cannot see, the ones operating beneath your conscious awareness, silently directing your money before your better judgment ever gets involved. Today, I am going to show you exactly how these invisible habits form, how they control your financial behavior, and how to replace them. Near the end of this lesson, I will give you a 3-step method for identifying and breaking any destructive money habit. But that method will not make sense unless you first understand the forces it is designed to overcome. So let me begin where every money habit begins, in a place most people never think to look. Every person carries 2 layers of financial behavior. The first layer is visible: what you spend, what you save, what you buy. These are the habits you can observe if you take the time to look honestly. The second layer is invisible: the beliefs, assumptions, and emotional responses that drive those visible actions from underneath. And I came to understand, through careful study, that the invisible layer frequently controls the visible one. Not occasionally, frequently, often without the person having any awareness that it is happening. Stop for a moment and answer this honestly. Have you ever decided to save more, meant it sincerely, and then watched the money disappear anyway? Have you ever set a budget, followed it for a few days, and then quietly abandoned it without fully understanding why? If so, you have experienced the power of an invisible belief overriding a conscious intention. Your visible plan said one thing. Your invisible habit said another, and the invisible habit won, because until it is brought into the light and deliberately replaced, it almost always does. Here is a practical way to test this in your own life. Think back to your last 5 purchases that were not absolute necessities. For each one, ask yourself, what was I feeling when I decided to buy this? Not what did I need? What was I feeling? Write down the honest answer. If you find that most of those purchases were driven by boredom, frustration, anxiety, a desire for comfort, or a need to feel in control, then you have just uncovered evidence that your invisible habits are influencing your visible spending. That simple exercise, done honestly, reveals more about your financial patterns than a month of tracking expenses. Now let me show you where these invisible beliefs come from, because understanding their origin is the first step toward changing them. Consider a child growing up in a household where money is a constant source of tension. The parents argue about bills. The adults say things like, money never stays, or people like us don't get ahead. No one delivers a formal lesson about finances, but by the time that child reaches adulthood, he carries a collection of beliefs about money that were absorbed before he was old enough to evaluate any of them. He may believe that holding on to money is unrealistic. He may believe that financial security belongs to other kinds of people, luckier people, smarter people, people who were born into different circumstances. He may believe that spending money quickly is simply what money is for, because that is all he ever saw anyone do with it. And here is what makes these beliefs so powerful. They do not feel like beliefs. They feel like facts, confirmed by the person's own experience, because the habits those beliefs create keep producing the same results. The belief drives the behavior produces the evidence, and the evidence reinforces the belief. It becomes a circle that most people never step outside of because from the inside, it looks like reality. I recommend an exercise to you now. Take a sheet of paper and write down what you honestly believe about money, not what you think you should believe, what you actually believe when no one is listening and you have no reason to perform. Write down the phrases you heard about wealth and poverty as a child. Write down what you observed the adults around you do when money arrived and what they did when it ran out. Write down how you feel when you imagine having a great deal of money and how you feel when you imagine losing everything. Most people who complete this exercise discover beliefs they never consciously chose. One person may find that he carries a deep suspicion that wealthy people are dishonest, a belief absorbed from a relative who repeated it for years. Another may discover she feels genuine guilt when she saves money because somewhere in her early experience, keeping money for yourself was treated as selfishness. These beliefs were planted before anyone had the ability to resist them, and they have been shaping financial behavior ever since. Recognizing them is the first act of power you exercise over them, but recognition alone will not change them. The old belief was installed through years of repetition and emotional reinforcement. It must be replaced the same way through deliberate, consistent repetition of a new belief until the new thought becomes the stronger response. I will show you exactly how to do that when we reach the method I have promised you. For now, understand this. You cannot change a financial habit that you have not first made visible to yourself. Let me now address one of the most common money habits I observed in my study of human behavior, and it is so widespread that most people consider it perfectly normal. I am speaking about spending money to manage emotions. The person who buys something after a difficult day, not because the item was needed, but because the act of purchasing provides a brief sense of relief. The person who shops when bored, not from desire, but from restlessness. The person who reaches for a purchase the way another person might reach for a distraction, not to acquire something useful, but to change an uncomfortable feeling into a comfortable one, even if only for a few minutes. This habit creates a cycle that strengthens itself with every repetition. Discomfort triggers spending. Spending creates temporary relief. The relief fades and is replaced by the quiet unease of having less money than before. That unease becomes a new source of discomfort, which triggers more spending, and the cycle continues, tightening with each rotation until the person finds himself in a financial position that his income alone cannot explain. He earns enough, he should be comfortable, and yet somehow the money is always gone, and he cannot clearly account for where it went. There is a deeper principle at work here that I want you to understand. Every time you trade money for a momentary feeling, you are making an exchange, but the terms of that exchange are never equal. The feeling lasts for minutes. The money is gone permanently. And over months and years, those unequal exchanges accumulate into a staggering cost that most people never calculate because each individual purchase seemed too small to matter. Here is where most people deceive themselves. They believe the answer is stricter discipline, a tighter budget, more willpower. But discipline applied against a habit you have not identified is effort spent pushing against a wall you cannot see. The more effective approach begins with awareness. Try this. For the next 7 days before every non-essential purchase, pause and ask one question. Am I buying this because I need it or because I am trying to change how I feel? You do not need to deny yourself anything during this exercise. Simply observe and record the honest answer. If the answer is that you are buying to change a feeling, note what that feeling is. Boredom, frustration, loneliness, stress, a desire to reward yourself. Within a week, you will see a pattern emerge that no budget could have revealed. That awareness, by itself, begins to weaken the automatic response, because a habit that is seen clearly loses some of its power over you. Now I want to address a second habit that operates through a different mechanism but produces the same result, spending that outpaces earning, no matter how much the income grows. I am speaking about the habit of financial comparison, measuring your progress not against your own aims, but against the visible possessions of the people around you. Upgrading because someone in your circle has upgraded. Spending not according to a plan, but according to a pressure. The pressure to keep pace, to avoid the appearance of falling behind, to maintain an image that may have nothing to do with your actual financial position. Throughout my study of achievement, I observed this pattern repeatedly. Men and women who earned well, who worked diligently, but who never accumulated anything of lasting value because every increase in their income was immediately consumed by a corresponding increase in their standard of living. Not because they sat down and decided to spend more, because the spending happened automatically, driven by the unconscious need to match their surroundings. And the person caught in this pattern rarely sees it for what it is. He does not tell himself he is spending to impress anyone. He tells himself his family deserves it. He tells himself he has earned it. The reasoning sounds perfectly sensible, but the driving force underneath is comparison, and comparison has no finish line. Consider two families receiving the same income. One family spends according to what the people around them have. Every year their expenses rise to match their rising wages. After 15 years, they have nothing saved, nothing invested, nothing built, despite earning well throughout. The other family spends according to a written financial purpose. They know exactly what they are building and why. Their neighbor's new purchase does not alter their plan because they are not competing with their neighbor. They are building something specific. After 15 years, they have accumulated meaningful wealth, not from higher earnings, but from spending that was governed by purpose instead of comparison. This next distinction matters. A definite financial purpose is one of the most effective protections against wasteful spending. When you know precisely what you are working toward, not a vague hope for improvement, but a specific written aim with a clear amount, a realistic timeline, and a concrete plan. Your spending begins to organize itself around that purpose. Unnecessary purchases lose their appeal because they start to feel like interference between you and the thing you want most. If you do not yet have a written financial purpose, I ask you to create one this week. Write down the specific amount you want to accumulate or the specific financial position you want to reach. Write down the timeline. Write down the actions you will take to get there. Read it every morning. A purpose that exists only in your thoughts is easy to abandon when temptation appears. A purpose that is written, reviewed, and measured becomes a force that shapes your daily decisions whether you feel motivated or not. Now let me address a habit that disguises itself so effectively as wisdom that most people never recognize it as destructive. It is the habit of delay. Waiting for the right time, waiting until you earn more, waiting until you feel confident, waiting until the conditions seem favorable. I ask you to consider honestly whether you are currently postponing a financial decision that you know should be made. If the answer is yes, then you are already paying a price for that delay, a price measured not in money lost, but in time lost. And time, once spent, cannot be recovered. The danger of delay is that it feels responsible. The person who waits believes he is being thoughtful, being cautious, being smart. And genuine caution has its place. But there is a critical difference between thoughtful planning and indefinite postponement. Planning has a deadline. Postponement does not. Planning produces action. Postponement produces only more postponement. And most people who believe they are planning are actually postponing because the plan never arrives at the point of execution. Imagine a man who decides at 25 that he will begin setting money aside next year once his income stabilizes. At 30, he adjusts the timeline. He will start after a major expense is behind him. At 35, another reason appears. At 40, he finally begins. But 15 years of potential growth have already been consumed, not by a bad decision, by no decision at all. And choosing nothing, I want you to understand, is still a choice. It is a choice to let time pass without working on your behalf. It is a choice to let inaction write the story of your financial life. Now consider a second person, the same age, the same income, who makes a different choice at 25. She does not wait for perfect conditions. She begins with a small amount, perhaps uncomfortably small, and directs it consistently toward her future. She does not earn more than the first person. She does not possess greater knowledge or better opportunities, but she made one decision that the other person kept postponing, and she repeated that decision month after month, while the other person repeated the decision to wait. After 15 years, the distance between their financial positions is enormous, not because of a single dramatic event, but because of a single repeated habit practiced over time. The habit of starting, of acting before every condition is perfect, of putting your resources into motion, even when the amount is small and the plan is imperfect, is one of the most valuable financial habits a person can develop. From Carnegie's example, from Ford's example, from the examples of every person I studied who built something lasting, the same principle emerged. They did not wait for certainty. They began and they corrected course as they went. Here is a practical step you can take immediately. When your income arrives, protect your essential needs first, your housing, your food, your utilities, your required debt payments, your non-negotiable obligations. Then, before any optional spending occurs, direct a predetermined amount toward your future. Not whatever happens to be left over at the end of the month, because experience teaches that nothing is ever left over. A specific amount, decided in advance, moved before the optional spending begins. The amount should be realistic for your current situation. If 5% is what you can manage today, begin with 5%. If you can manage 10, direct 10. Do not compare your starting amount with anyone else's. That is the comparison habit operating under a different name. The specific number matters less than the consistency of the practice. A person who sets aside a modest amount faithfully, month after month, without interruption, develops a fundamentally different relationship with money than the person who saves large sums when enthusiasm is high and then contributes nothing for months when it fades. Here is a practical guideline. Choose an amount that is small enough that you can sustain it through a difficult month, but large enough that you notice it leaving your account. That tension, small enough to maintain, large enough to feel, is what gives the habit its power. You are not trying to become wealthy overnight. You are training your mind to treat your future as a priority rather than an afterthought. And that shift in priority, practiced consistently, changes everything that follows. Where possible, automate the contribution so that it happens without requiring a decision each time. Remove the moment of choice, and you remove the opportunity for the old habit of postponement to intervene. Now, I want to share a distinction that may surprise you because it challenges what many people assume about building wealth. Through my research, I observed that the most financially successful individuals were rarely the most aggressive hoarders of money. Many of them were remarkably purposeful in directing money outward, into enterprises that created value, into people who could multiply resources, into ventures that served purposes larger than personal accumulation. They understood that money directed with intention toward productive purposes often generates greater returns than money gripped tightly out of fear. This is not an invitation to give away what you cannot afford to lose. It is not advice to be generous before your essential obligations are met. It is a recognition that the habit of thinking about what money can build is a more productive habit than thinking only about what money can protect. Purpose-driven spending and purpose-driven generosity come from the same source, the mindset of direction rather than drift. Before we reach the method I have promised you, I want to address one more pattern that I believe deserves your attention, because it is responsible for more abandoned financial plans than perhaps any other single cause. It is the response most people have when they make a financial mistake. Suppose a person has been following a new saving habit faithfully for 3 weeks. Then, one evening, an old trigger appears. Stress, boredom, social pressure, and the person falls back into the old pattern. He makes an impulsive purchase. He spends money he had committed to saving. And here is where the real damage occurs. It is not the purchase itself that destroys the plan. It is what happens next. The person feels that he has failed. He tells himself that the method does not work, that he does not have the discipline, that he was foolish to try, and he abandons the entire effort, not because one mistake ruined him, but because he interpreted one mistake as permanent defeat. I want you to understand something that most people never grasp about the process of building a new habit. Mistakes are not the opposite of progress. They are part of the process. Every person who has ever replaced a deeply embedded habit has stumbled during the transition. The difference between the person who succeeds and the person who quits is not that one made fewer mistakes. It is that one resumed the practice after the mistake while the other surrendered. When you make a financial mistake, and you will, do not abandon the plan. Study what triggered the mistake. Ask what you could have done differently, and then resume the replacement action immediately, the very next time the trigger appears. Treat the mistake as information, not as a verdict. This single shift in how you respond to failure can mean the difference between a habit that takes root and a plan that is quietly abandoned within a month. Now we arrive at the method I promised you. Everything we have discussed, the invisible beliefs, the emotional triggers, the comparison, the delay, the purpose, the response to mistakes, all of it converges here. Any destructive money habit can be weakened and replaced if you are willing to follow 3 definite steps. These steps are not complicated. They do not require special knowledge or unusual ability, but they do require honest self-examination and sustained effort, which is why most people will hear them and do nothing. Do not be most people. Step 1, see the habit clearly. Identify the exact behavior, the specific trigger that activates it, and the belief or emotion that supports it. Do not use vague language with yourself. Not, I spend too much. That description is too blurred to act on. Name the habit precisely. I order things online most evenings because I feel restless after work, and shopping distracts me from that restlessness. I upgrade purchases I cannot comfortably afford because I feel pressure to match the standard of living I see around me. I avoid reviewing my finances because the numbers make me anxious, so problems grow without my attention until they become emergencies. Until you can describe the habit, its trigger, and the feeling behind it in one clear, honest sentence, you are not yet ready for the next step. The precision of your description determines the precision of your solution. Step 2, choose one definite replacement action. Not a vague intention to do better, not a general promise to be more careful, a specific, concrete response that you will perform when the trigger appears. If evening restlessness sends you to an online store, decide in advance that when that feeling arrives, you will instead open your written financial purpose and review your progress toward it. If comparison with a colleague triggers an unnecessary purchase, decide that when the urge appears, you will wait 48 hours before acting on it, and during that time, you will review your own aim and ask whether this purchase advances it or delays it. If you avoid looking at your finances, replace avoidance with a 5-minute weekly review at the same time each week, starting with the simple act of looking at the numbers without judgment. The replacement must be decided before the trigger arrives, not during it. In the moment, when the old habit is pulling at you, the familiar response will always feel more natural and more urgent than the new one. Your only advantage is preparation. The person who has decided in advance what they will do has a plan. The person who tries to decide in the moment has only willpower, and willpower, in my experience, loses to habit far more often than it wins. Step 3. Practice the replacement consistently for at least 90 days and review your progress each week. I do not present 90 days as a guarantee that the habit will be permanently erased. No honest person can make that promise. I present it as a structured period during which you give the new response enough repetition to become your stronger pattern. Some habits may require longer, some may shift more quickly. The purpose of the 90-day framework is accountability, a defined stretch of time during which you commit to observing, practicing, reviewing, and resuming after mistakes. And I want to emphasize this one more time because it is where most people lose the battle. When you stumble, and you will stumble, do not treat one failure as proof that the method does not work. Study the mistake. Resume immediately. One mistake does not destroy the process. Abandoning the process after one mistake does. Here is your assignment for tonight. Take one sheet of paper and complete 3 actions before you sleep. First, write down one specific money habit you know is working against your future. Describe the trigger that activates it and the feeling behind it. Be precise. Second, write down one specific replacement action you will perform the next time that trigger appears. Make it concrete enough that you could explain it to another person in one sentence. Third, decide on a start date tomorrow and commit to practicing the replacement for 90 days, reviewing your progress once each week. When you miss a day, do not abandon the effort. Note what happened, learn from it, and resume. That is the method. It is not dramatic. It is not glamorous. There is no secret hidden inside it, and that is precisely why most people will not follow it. They want something that sounds extraordinary. But the people who build lasting financial discipline do not build it with extraordinary methods. They build it with ordinary actions, repeated with uncommon consistency, directed by a definite purpose that they refuse to abandon. I have placed before you the principles I spent years uncovering. I have shown you where invisible habits form and how to make them visible. I have given you practical steps you can use this week and a method you can begin tonight. But none of it changes anything until you act, and not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not after one more video or one more book or one more conversation about money. Tonight. Your repeated daily decisions are casting votes for the kind of future you will live. Every dollar spent without awareness is a vote for a future you did not choose. Every dollar directed with purpose is a vote for the life you are deliberately building. You are casting those votes right now, today, this week, this month, and every single day the ballots are being counted. The only question is whether you will take hold of that process or continue to let it run without your direction. That decision, made today, honored tomorrow, and practiced until it becomes part of who you are, is the true beginning of wealth. If this lesson gave you something valuable, subscribe to Napoleon Mindset for more timeless principles of success and wealth.